actually built medieval Europe. When we think about the Middle Ages, we remember kings and castles, knights and cathedrals. But history rarely asks a more important question. Who worked? Who plowed the fields that fed entire kingdoms? Who cut the stone that raised cathedrals toward the sky? Who labored from sunrise to darkness so that medieval society could exist at all? This is the story history forgot to tell the workers of medieval Europe. The peasants, serfs, artisans, and laborers whose lives were shaped by work, obligation, and survival. In this video, we explore what daily life and labor were really like in the Middle Ages, not through the eyes of kings or nobles, but through the hands of the people who built the medieval world and were almost never remembered by name. Medieval Europe was a world sustained almost entirely by human effort. No engines, no electricity, no mechanized production. Everything moved by muscle, human or animal, and by time measured in daylight. More than 90% of the population worked the land. Most people were born into labor, lived within it, and died without ever leaving it. Work was not a profession. It was a condition of life. Children learned tasks as soon as they could walk. Elders worked until their bodies failed them. There was no retirement, only exhaustion. Labor structured the calendar, the body, and the soul. The backbone of medieval society was the peasantry. Peasants were not a single group. They ranged from relatively free tenant farmers to serfs legally bound to the land, but all shared one reality. Survival depended on relentless work. A peasant's year followed the agricultural cycle, plowing in spring, planting and weeding in early summer, harvesting in late summer and autumn, repairing tools, tending animals, and surviving winter scarcity. Days began before sunrise. Work paused briefly at midday. It ended only when darkness made labor impossible. Food was simple and repetitive. Bread, porridge, legumes, onions, sometimes cheese. Meat was rare, hunger was common. A failed harvest meant famine. A bad winter meant death. And yet these workers fed cities, nobles, monasteries, and armies. They carried the weight of society on their backs. For many peasants, labor was not freely chosen. Serfdom bound people to estates owned by lords. They owed labor days, unpaid work on the lord's fields, in addition to tending their own plots. They paid rents in grain, labor, or coin. They paid fees to marry, to inherit land, even to grind grain in the lord's mill. Freedom was limited. Mobility was restricted. Justice favored those with power. Yet medieval workers were not passive victims. They negotiated. They resisted quietly. They fled when they could. They revolted when pressure became unbearable. Labor shaped not only survival, but tension. From the 11th century onward, Europe began to change. Towns grew. Markets expanded. Trade networks connected villages to distant regions. With cities came new kinds of workers: artisans, builders, weavers, metalworkers, bakers, tanners, carpenters, masons. These workers organized into guild associations that regulated training, wages, quality, and competition. Guilds offered protection but also control. They defined who could work, how much they earned, and what they produced. Becoming a master craftsman required years of unpaid apprenticeship. Many never reached that status. Urban labor was specialized and exhausting. Stonecutters shaped cathedrals block by block. Weavers worked looms for endless hours. Tanners handled hides soaked in urine and chemicals, risking disease and social exclusion. Cities offered opportunity, but not comfort. Women were central to medieval labor, yet largely erased from its record. They worked the fields alongside men. They brewed beer, baked bread, spun wool, wove cloth, sold goods in markets. In towns, women worked as midwives, healers, servants, alewives, seamstresses. Many trades depended on female labor, especially in textile production, the largest industry of medieval Europe. Yet women's work was often classified as help rather than labor. Their wages were lower, their guild participation limited or forbidden. Widows sometimes ran workshops. Poor women worked until their bodies broke. Work did not exempt them from domestic responsibilities. It doubled them. Their labor sustained families and economies without recognition. Medieval labor was dangerous. There were no safety standards, no protective equipment, no compensation for injury. A fall from scaffolding could kill a mason. A crushed limb could end a laborer's livelihood. Infection was often fatal. Fields carried their own risks. Broken tools, animal attacks, exposure to cold, heat, and disease. Urban workers faced pollution, overcrowding, and epidemics. The Black Death of the 14th century devastated laboring populations. Entire villages disappeared. Work stopped. Fields lay abandoned. But from catastrophe came transformation. After the plague, labor became scarce. Survivors demanded higher wages. They moved more freely. They negotiated better conditions. Elites resisted. Laws attempted to freeze wages and restrict mobility. Punishments followed, but the balance had shifted. Worker revolts erupted across Europe. The Jacquerie in France, the Peasants' revolt in England, urban uprisings in Italy and Flanders. These movements were brutally suppressed, but not meaningless. They forced recognition of labor's value. For the first time, workers briefly stood at the center of historical change. Work in medieval Europe was deeply spiritualized. The church taught that labor was both punishment and virtue, a consequence of the fall and a path to salvation. Monastic communities elevated work through discipline. Pray and work shaped religious life for common workers. Faith offered meaning where comfort was absent. Saints protected trades. Festivals interrupted toil. Holy days provided rare rest. Religion softened hardship, but also justified inequality. Still, belief sustained those whose lives offered little reward on earth. When medieval history was written, it favored power. Chronicles recorded kings, battles, miracles. Labor was background noise. Workers were anonymous, replaceable, silent. But archaeology tells another story. Worn tools, calloused bones, malnourished skeletons. The material record preserves what texts ignored. These were not passive muscles. They were skilled, adaptive, resilient. They negotiated survival every day. Every cathedral stone was lifted by workers. Every road was cleared by hands. Every market fed by unseen labor. Europe's cultural and economic foundations rest on their effort. The Renaissance, the modern economy, the industrial world, all built upon medieval labor. Yet their names faded. History forgot them. But the world still stands because of them. To remember medieval workers is not nostalgia, it is recognition. They lived short lives under immense pressure. They created beauty they would never own. They sustained systems that rarely served them. And yet they endured. Their story is not one of glory, but of persistence. In the rhythm of work, in the weight of survival, in the silence between records, they shaped history, even when history forgot their names. If history remembered kings by name, it was built by people whose names were never written. Remembering medieval workers is not about the past alone. It is about recognizing the invisible labor behind every civilization. If this story helped you see the Middle Ages differently, you can support this channel by subscribing and by sharing this video with someone who values history beyond crowns and battles. And if you'd like to explore more forgotten lives, ideas, and voices from the medieval world, you are always welcome here.